Well, hello and welcome to our first episode of the Riding Report with our MP, Scott Aitchison. And of course, he is joining me now by Skype. Scott, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, James.
So, Scott, we're going to jump right into it. Unfortunately, the first episode of this new series coincides with the COVID-19 pandemic, or maybe it's fortunate because we can hear your thoughts on this situation a little more in depth right now. So, the first thing I do want to get into, Scott, is a bit of a discussion that happened regarding the virtual meetings in Parliament. Now, I know there was a bit of back and forth especially between the Conservatives and Liberals on this, but it seems an agreement has been reached. Can you kind of explain that to me and how that decision was reached?
Yeah, well, there certainly has been an agreement, thankfully. Cooler heads have prevailed. I would say there's a number of Conservative MPs who felt very strongly that we should all be back there all at the same time and all that kind of stuff. But thankfully, not everybody in the caucus felt that way. They recognized that, we could do these limited sittings with, just a smaller number of MPs to make sure that we were social distancing. And of course, the government was proposing, no sittings in the House, but just a virtual parliament. Of course, the problem with the virtual parliament, there actually are some technological challenges that we hope we have worked out. So today, in fact, at 2 o'clock, we'll be trying out a dry run of this virtual parliament using Zoom. So it'll have all 338 members of parliament on it, hopefully. And we're going to see how it works and work out any glitches so that we can have our first virtual sitting on Tuesday. And then there'll be an in-person sitting with a limited number of MPs on Wednesday. And then Thursday we'll follow up with another virtual sitting. And it won't be a traditional sitting of the House of Commons. It'll be more like what they call a committee of the whole. So a little more relaxed rules, just lots of questions and answer session. It'll be a little more free flowing.
Scott, I want to ask you, your outgoing leader, Andrew Scheer, was really pushing to have these in-person sessions. Whereas, a lot of people are wondering, why isn't it just more beneficial to completely have a virtual meeting for every single meeting? And wondering if maybe Parliament is sitting too heavily on tradition.
Well, I think one of the reasons why it's important for us to have in-person sittings is because of the technological challenges of 338 people on a Zoom call. I've been involved in enough of them now to know that the technology is it's great for smaller groups, but it's a little more challenging for larger groups. And I think, I think our tradition is important, but I would agree wholeheartedly that a variation of that tradition can suffice, certainly in this situation. So, as I say, there were some folks in the caucus that felt we should be back there 5 days a week and full sittings. That's where our job is. And they cited examples of, lots of essential workers who are, working full time, and surely Parliament is essential. And I agree that it is essential. But this has been a great compromise to make sure that the official opposition is doing its constitutional duty. Our system is designed so that government is questioned and challenged. That's why it is set up this way, because we get the best decisions when governments and people in power are held to account. Whether it's a Liberal or a Conservative government, the role of the opposition is important. It's constitutional, and I'm happy that we've worked out this compromise. I think the in-person sittings you'll see will obviously be a little more effective than the Zoom meetings, but we have both to compare to, and we'll see how it goes.
So let's switch gears and look at a more local level now. Just curious, what are some of the things that you have been working on locally to support your constituents in Parry-Sound, Muskoka?
Well, my staff have been working full time, mostly from home, obviously. The offices are open, although not open necessarily just to walk-in traffic, but email and phone. We've been dealing with an awful lot of folks confused about EI and the CERB benefit. In the first couple of weeks, my staff were helping dozens and dozens of people from Parry-Sound, Muskoka get home from different parts of the world. that was a huge challenge. And so we were working on a lot of those kind of files as well. We've also been hearing directly from small business owners, which prompted my decision to hold these business webinars, I guess, via Zoom, all around the riding. We did those in concert with Norm Miller and his office, the MPP, and each of the, many of the mayors in the local communities. And the chambers of commerce helped us get the word out to local business. So we've been hearing, from small business about issues that exist with the current funding and support programs, and trying to raise those issues with the government as well to make sure that the truly small businesses and businesses that are seasonal in nature, which of course makes up the vast majority of business in Parry-Sound, Muskoka, we wanted to make sure that they were being heard and that the message that they were giving me was getting up the chain to make sure that the government knew that, we need to make some adjustments to some of these programs. So they've been reasonably receptive. They've made a couple of changes to the programs, but there's still a little more that needs to be done to make sure that truly small business doesn't get left behind in this.
So let's talk about that message. I know you've been hearing a lot from these local businesses. I'm curious, what is the main message coming forward from them? And also, I know you've heard a lot of sort of creativity coming from them in keeping their doors open virtually or otherwise. So just tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, well, so the truly small businesses in our communities, and particularly when you think about the tourism-related businesses, the programs that were on offer for example, the wage subsidy. You had to have a fairly significant payroll for any business to qualify for that wage subsidy. Well, so many of our businesses have minimal wages because it's a husband and wife or something, and they maybe have one part-time employee. And so they didn't qualify. And then the loan program, you had to have, a significant payroll for that loan program as well, or, loss in revenue. Well, when your revenue comes in really, July and August, and it's quiet for the last, the first few months of the year, it's tough to show that, you're struggling to make ends meet because your real revenue doesn't happen until July and August. And yet you've got to spend money now to be ready for July and August. And so these are the kinds of areas where, we pointed out that, these folks simply wouldn't qualify because they are the truly smallest of small businesses. And so, one of the programs that the Conservative Party was proposing was, which we felt would be really quick and easy to do with a couple of keystrokes, but was the concept of simply refunding the net GST that businesses had submitted to the federal government for the past 12 months. We felt like that would be something that would get cash into the hands of these small business owners right away. It would capture the GST they submitted for those busy months of July and August, and it would help them, let's say, the shops on the main streets of, these small communities, make sure they can pay their rent while they, hold out until summer comes along. And so the government wasn't really terribly receptive to refunding all the GST. The cynic in me says it was probably too easy, and they like, programs to administer. And so what they have done, which is a good thing, I mean, it's not precisely what we wanted, but they have come up with this commercial rent program, which again, it's a little cumbersome, but we're working through it, and we're hopeful that it will help an awful lot of businesses. Without something like this, there was a real possibility of our main streets and all our the towns, big and small, in Parry-Sound, Muskoka, potentially looking like a ghost town because, with no revenue coming in and not being able to open the doors and bills still piling up, there's an awful lot of businesses. They just don't have, months and months worth of working capital to sustain no income for that many months. And so we think that this will be helpful. We're pleased, obviously, as well with the the provincial government's efforts to, assist with certain costs as well. So, everyone has been working pretty well together, and we're hopeful that a few more of our suggestions will actually, meet with positive reception from the government, and we can make a few more little changes to make sure we capture more of the truly small business in Muskoka, Parry-Sound, Muskoka.
Scott, let's circle back to the talking about paying rent. Now, the federal government recently announced that small businesses will only have to pay 25% of their rent, giving them a 75% reduction, and will help pay about, I think it was 50% of that reduction. Just tell me a bit about that program.
Well, you know as much as I do at this point right now. And this has been one of our challenges: is that the Prime Minister will announce a program at 11 in the morning, and then these ministers will roll out and announce a little more detail. But then, of course, the bureaucracy has to work out all the details. So we're still getting those. We understand that that is the formula. And again, it's not ideal. I mean, it's in some cases there might be landlords that simply don't choose to engage on the program, and the small business owner might miss out. And so we're still learning more about it, and we're hopeful to have a few more answers this week as we get back into the week and get rolling.
Now, just one last question I wanted to ask you, more on a federal side again before we take a break here. The NDP recently brought up an interesting fact that they felt the federal government should not be bailing out big businesses that have been known to avoid taxes. So I'm just curious, where do the Conservatives stand on this thought process?
Well, I think that the Liberals are trying to strike a balance here between saving the economy and big business is a part of that. I do believe that everybody should pay their fair share, and corporations that are not paying their fair share should. So, I don't know if right now, in the middle of this situation, is the time to, not support those larger businesses that employ literally millions of Canadians. But I think that this will be one of the many discussions that'll be, I think, pretty important to have once we get through this, to make sure that the tax system is fair, not just for the mom and pop shop on Main Street, Parry-Sound, but also for the big corporations.
Absolutely. A lot of discussions to come out of this for sure. We're going to circle back around to some more local looks of what you're doing here, Scott, but until then, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. Earlier in the show, we did talk about a few different federal and local projects. We talked about small businesses, rent subsidies, things of those nature. Now, Scott, returning to this conversation, you're just over halfway through your first year as MP. And I know, you've basically been thrown in the deep end here. So I'm just curious, how has it felt, taking on such a large issue, coming into a new position?
Well, I guess it is a big job. There's no question about that. I would say though it's a little different than what I'm used to. When I was the mayor, I was the basically the CEO of a corporation. So as the mayor, the kind of the buck stops with you. And you're the leader of that organization and that community. In this case, it is a much bigger job. It covers a much wider area, but I'm not the leader of the Conservative Party. I'm certainly not the leader of any government right now. I'm a member of a legislature with responsibilities to obviously legislate and debate ideas and legislation in the House, but also, of course, and more importantly, probably the biggest part of the job is working with constituents, helping them sort through government challenges, hearing their ideas. And in that respect, I mean, this whole situation has actually provided me more of an opportunity to spend time, speaking with small business owners and constituents directly and hearing their issues and raising those issues with the government. And it's actually, I would say, worked, fairly well, considering the fact we've had to do it all through Skype and Zoom and all of these, these technological methods of communicating and meeting with each other. So, it's certainly been a bit odd, but I'm no different than anybody else. It's been odd for everybody, and I'm just grateful that I've found a way to do the job, and my staff are continuing to work full time. They're all very busy. I'm probably busier now than I would be, if I was in Ottawa, just dealing with issues. So it's been different, but it's working out, and we're trying to do the best we can in these circumstances, just like everybody else is.
So tell me about the inner workings of your party. I know usually there's an opportunity for you to meet face to face in Ottawa while you're, meeting outside of meeting in Parliament. How do you stay in touch? What types of conversations do you see happening?
Well, so you're right. We have what's called our national caucus, which is all conservative MPs and conservative senators. That's every Wednesday. So all the parties have their national caucus meetings on Wednesday morning. And so we've continued to do that, but we're doing it via Zoom, and it's working okay. As I say, it's a little cumbersome, but we follow the same schedule and of presentations, and we have open mics where people can ask their question or raise a point. Yeah, it's one of the things I really enjoy about our caucus. Well, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because, of course, it's great that everybody has a chance to ask a question. There's no censorship in there, but of course, some people like to talk a little more than I would care for them to talk, but that's another issue. So that continues to happen. We also have our Ontario caucus, so all the Conservative MPs from Ontario, we meet regularly as well, and so we've continued to do that too, just to talk about issues that are maybe more specific to Ontario. And then, of course, there's also issue-based caucuses, and so those are still meeting as well via Zoom. And one of those areas, of course, so this is what I was sort of the point I was making earlier about chatting with small businesses and the owners of those businesses and hearing the challenges they're facing. And then we get on the small business or the finance conservative caucus, and it works really well because the shadow critic. So James Cumming is an MP from Edmonton. He's our shadow minister for small business and entrepreneurialism. And so he's on these calls, and I get to speak to him directly and say, listen, this is what I'm hearing from small business in my communities. This is what the riding's made up of. This would be something that would really help them. And he often has presentations, just like we would have in a live meeting, where we can talk about those issues. He brings up things that they've been talking about that we share back with constituents here. So the information is getting filtered up the chain, as they say, very effectively. So those meetings continue to happen, and then of course politics, like so many things, it's a relationship business. You got to get to know people, and so that that's something that I was doing. Obviously, a fair bit, getting to know the other MPs from all over the country, not just Conservatives, but Liberals and NDPs and the Green Party members. Not many of the Bloc; they're a little more standoffish. But we chat over the phone. You keep in touch via text messages and a few phone calls, and just chatting with people from around the country about what they're experiencing, because I think that's an important element as well. Parry-Sound Muskoka isn't the only seasonal tourist-based kind of economy. There are lots of ridings all over the country. They're in the same boat. And so just hearing, what those MPs are hearing, whether they're Liberals or Conservatives, it's important for me to hear that, because if I'm hearing the same message from backbench Liberal MPs, that tells me that, it's not just me that's complaining. It's all parties in the government hopefully will hear that message. So, it's we use the technology and we just keep in touch.
So, having these discussions with other MPs in your party, is there any, and you sort of did touch down on this, but just to expand a bit more, is there any more discussion about what the federal government could be doing more to help out Canadians? And for example, are there any discussions on pushing provinces to do more testing? I'd like to point out Ontario specifically.
Well, I think that what's happening, of course, is that the federal government and the provinces are working, very well together. Their chief medical officers of health are working well together. I know that the Premier of Ontario has certainly committed to increasing the amount of testing. I was just watching last night on CBC News, the National, about South Korea and how remarkably well they have flattened the curve, and it seems as though it's based largely on testing. So, I'm hopeful that they're learning from our own experience in this situation, and I hope they're learning from, the experience and what's transpired in different countries as well. It appears as though South Korea is a great example of maybe how we could have handled things maybe a little bit better and got on this a little bit faster. But I've said all along that I don't think now is the time to be critical of how the government responded. That time will come, and I can assure you it will be a vigorous debate. But right now is the time just to stick together and just keep advocating for small businesses and individuals, and just keep working together and making sure we get through this.
So let's switch back to talking about what you're doing again. Now, I know, at the beginning of this, there was a call to get Canadians back home. A lot of them ended up being stranded, or just felt it might be safer to stay away and stay where they work. Now, have you been in touch with these constituents, and what are the conversations like now?
Yeah, my staff certainly have been. My constituency manager, Kirsten Baker, was the one that was focused primarily on these on getting people home. I certainly dealt with family members who were here still and advocating, for their loved one to get home. And so, I think most of them are quite appreciative of being able to get home, and certainly appreciated our assistance. There are some that chose not to come home, and so we've just obviously wished everybody well, but we're eager to help whoever we could get home that wanted to get home.
So let's talk about local response now. Again, I know, being a former mayor of Huntsville, it's it must be strange to be outside looking in. But how do you feel about these local responses, from the mayors?
I think the mayors are all doing a tremendous job. I've worked with all of them, and I have a lot of respect for all of them. I would say that in this circumstance, it's certainly a new thing for local municipalities to have to deal with, and each municipality has done a few things a little bit differently, but I know that we are all learning from this experience, and I think what matters most, of course, to all the mayors and the councillors is people's health and safety first and foremost. And so I know that they have all operated and all made decisions from that perspective first, and that's what matters most. These are compassionate people who care about their communities, and they care about those people in the communities that make up these communities. So I'm really proud of all the mayors and what they've done, and how they've responded, and all the councils. I think they're doing a great job.
Is there a lot of open communication between you and these local municipalities, the officials as well?
Yeah, there's certainly a little bit. I chat with the mayors periodically. Obviously, included all the mayors in the business roundtables. There were 5 of them. So the first one we did was Huntsville Lake of Bays. So of course, Mayor Terziano and Mayor Glover were both on that call. Then I did Bracebridge and Muskoka Lake. So I had Mayor Smith and Mayor Harding on that one. Then we did one in Parry-Sound and area, and of course, there's a few more mayors in the Parry-Sound part of the district. So we had Jamie on the call, as well as I can't remember who all we had now, but anyhow, we had a number of the mayors on that one, and of course, then we had one in Georgian Bay and Gravenhurst where we had the mayors there. So we've had them engaged, and then our Omagwin one, of course, we had even more mayors. So it was a very busy screen, but lots of conversations with each of those mayors leading up to those events, and lots of conversations in the intervening days as well. I probably talk with Mayor Terziano the most, just because we worked together. She was my deputy mayor, and she's a new mayor, so we chat every so often about just about strategy and what they're doing, and how things are going. I think she, like I certainly did when I was a brand new mayor, likes to just sort of, hash things out with somebody that they know has been through it before. So,
Scott, before we wrap the show, I just want to ask one last question. There's some discussion now about opening the economy again, and Ontario specifically is presenting an itemized sort of agenda of how they'd like to do that. Are these conversations a bit too soon, or do you think we're right on track here?
No, I don't think they're too soon at all. I think a conversation about how we open up and get our economy going again doesn't mean we are imminently doing anything unsafe. But I think the conversation is important, and I think the conversation should be not just about how we get rolling, but what the new normal looks like. These are important conversations to have, particularly in a democracy. And so I'm I'm grateful to hear people have these conversations, and I'm grateful that the provinces are actually talking about this. And Premier Moe in Saskatchewan has rolled out a cautious, step-by-step program that they're going to monitor every step of the way and make sure that they're doing everything as safely as they can. I think that, in a place like Saskatchewan, which has a much smaller, more spread out population than places like Ontario, and they don't have nearly as many cases. It's a great thing for us to model and watch and learn from.
All
I
right,
think that's the
Scott, we
key
need
to
to
all
cut you
this. We
off
want to
there.
make sure that we
Unfortunately,
continue to learn
we
from.
need to wrap the show, but I do appreciate you taking the time. We will check in with you again soon for another episode of the Riding Report. Thank you once again to MP Aitchison, and catch us next time for more details on what's happening locally and federally.